Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, all of you.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Sanjay, had she been able to join?
Yeah, he joined, ma'am, but her name is not reflecting. Her name is written here HP. He is coming to panel just now.
Has Dr. Anupama joined? Sanjay ji?
Yes, ma'am, joined now.
She has joined. Dr. Anupama, are you there? No, I don't think so. Just let me call her. Let me know.
I am calling, ma'am. I am calling.
Okay, call her and see what is the problem.
He is trying, ma'am. He is trying. He is trying.
Someone else is the host, I suppose. Sanjay ji?
Yes, ma'am.
Someone else is the host who is letting everybody in? Or are you giving
Almost.
the entry?
No, I am not getting the entry.
Okay, okay. Then ask the concerned person to talk to her. What is the problem?
Okay, just talking, ma'am.
Yeah.
Sanjay ji.
Yes,
Hello.
sir.
What's the problem, Sanjay ji? She has joined.
Anupama ma'am, can you hear me? Dr. Anupama Chaudhary ma'am, can you hear me?
But in participant, just panelist name is just, it's there.
Yes, she is visible. Sir, she is visible. Voice is not coming.
Yeah, good afternoon, Dr. Chaudhary. Hello.
Anupama madam, can you hear me? Dr. Anupama Chaudhary madam, can you hear me?
Good afternoon, ma'am. I
She is
think
not
she is
able to
unable
listen,
to.
ma'am.
Sanjay ji, am I audible? Sanjay ji?
Yes, Nibha ma'am, you are audible.
Good afternoon to all of you. Dr. Vikas,
Yes, you are audible.
am I
Good
audible?
afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, all of you. Good afternoon to all the students. Dr. Anupama, can you hear me? Dr. Chaudhary, am I audible? I think she is not connected yet.
But in panel list, her name, it's visible there.
Yeah, she appears on the screen also, but I don't know whether I'm audible to her or not.
Perhaps her microphone is not working.
Dr. Anupama, am I audible? There is some problem. Yeah, can you hear me? I don't think you can hear me. But you cannot hear? Oh, but you cannot, I'm not audible to you, na? I'm not audible. So there must be, then it must be some problem on your side. See whether your microphone is working or not properly. Because all the others can listen to me. Only it's probably the problem is only with your system. Yeah. You are again disconnected. Is there some network issue or what? Then right now I once again sent you the link again on your WhatsApp, so you can join again afresh. Please. Yeah, please. Sanjay ji?
Yes, ma'am.
Perhaps she's again disconnected. Please help her to join. If she comes back again, see how she can join again.
Okay, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah. You have joined, but you are not to be seen here. But I cannot see you. But
Yes,
if
she
you
is
have
coming.
joined, if you have, yeah, if you have
Yeah,
joined,
yeah, she is coming. She is coming, ma'am. No problem. She is
yeah, please see so.
I am calling her, ma'am. I am calling her. Anupama man, can you hear me?
Anupama ji, am I audible?
There is some problem with her set, ma'am.
This is not done, bhai. आपने उनको बताया कि उनको ऑडियो वीडियो कनेक्ट करना है?
हाँ मैडम, बताया हुआ है, उनको बताया है।
क्या इशू है समझ में नहीं आ रहा। Yes, I can see you, but your voice is not audible.
निभा मैडम, मेरे को कनेक्ट कीजिए।
Yes, Dr. Anupama. Kindly unmute yourself, Dr. Anupama. Now you are connected, it seems. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Unmute. Yes,
Yeah.
am I audible now?
Yes, yes, finally.
Okay, I'm so sorry, but I do not know. I was trying so hard, literally.
It's
This is
okay,
such a
it's
shock
okay.
for me also. It's really a shock for me. I was trying to show the PowerPoint from my laptop, but I do not know what happened. So how am I to show this PowerPoint?
Yeah, actually,
Would it be
actually,
possible?
I have downloaded it on my laptop, on my system.
Okay.
I'll try
Okay,
to
okay.
share it from here with the help of Mr. Sanjay. I don't know
Okay.
whether I'll be able to do it or not, but I'll try my level best. So first of all, now formally, let me welcome Dr. Anupama Chaudhary, Associate Professor of English from MUC Women's College, Bardwan, West Bengal. And we have been earlier with her last year in the faculty development program that we organized. I welcome all my colleagues also and all the students of PhD coursework. Now in this COVID situation, I have tried, the department has been trying its level best to cope up with this situation and how to help the students more and more. But in this connection, we have tried to bring about this web lecture series for the students. And I think this will help them a lot. And in this connection, we have started this first lecture of this web lecture series with Dr. Anupama Chaudhary. I think she needs no introduction, but some of our students are new to her and she is new to our students. So I must tell them that she has a teaching experience of complete 18 years. And after completing her MPhil and PhD in English, she did her MBA in Human Resource Management. She has 54 publications in peer-reviewed journals and volumes to her credit. Dr. Chaudhary has participated and presented in 84 seminars, conferences, and in 152 webinars, both in India and abroad. She has completed several courses in psychology, women health, and stress management. She was awarded DKIRF Achievement Award in 2020, IMRF Best Literary Award 2020, and Certificate of Gold Medal Achievement by Allison, Ireland, and University of Texas at Austin for Advanced Diploma in French in 2020. She is a reviewer for 17 journals and editorial board member of 11 international journals, and she has also completed a UGC-funded research project. Her areas of interest are gender studies, alternate sexualities, queer feminism. But today she is with us to speak with you on partition literature. Now, when we talk of partition literature, the very first thing that comes to our mind is the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947. Now, this is one of the most sensitive thoughts and subjects that has been treated by historians as well as literatures, not only of modern South Asia, but also worldwide. People have been doing a lot of research has been done on this subject, and it has been very critically analyzed by many of the historians, both from South Asia and from the other parts of the world. And we all know that many books have been written, some on the basis of first-hand information or first-hand experience, and the others on the accounts of the secondary accounts. We can call them secondary accounts. So we have a varied number of people who have written so many books on these subjects, which we are supposed to study under the unit of partition literature in the PhD coursework. So for this purpose, we now invite Dr. Chaudhary for her specialized lecture on the subject, which will help our students a lot, no doubt. Thank you. So Dr. Chaudhary, now over to you, and you can start with your lecture. I'll try to share the screen along with your lecture, and let me find out whether I'm able to do it or not.
Okay, thank you, madam. Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yeah,
Yes.
yes.
Yes, thank you, ma'am, for your kind introduction, and my gratitude, my heartfelt gratitude to Professor Magad University, Research Center, and Department of English, Magad University, Bodh Gaya. My gratitude also to Professor Neeraj Kumar and to other faculty members, the esteemed faculty members. Also, my heartfelt gratitude to the organizers, to the team over here. And I'm really, really very sorry for what has happened for this technical glitch. I was trying very hard, but I couldn't join. I beg an apology, my sincere apology for that. And I also thank I also thank the participants for their being there and for bearing with me. And again, I say, I'm so sorry. My apologies once again. And thank you all for letting me speak in this session, the talk that would be delivered for the PhD coursework students. So I have prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you, but somehow, as I said, because of the technical glitch, things are not being in line now. So anyway, without much ado, let me just begin my talk. So will I begin, ma'am? Will I begin my lecture?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yes, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm very sorry. Maybe I'll share my PowerPoint some other time. So my lecture is titled Trauma, Memories, and Imagined Identities. I'll be talking about India's partition, the revisiting dimension in this aspect. Now, I would like to begin my talk with a very popular excerpt from the very famous Urdu poet, celebrated Urdu poet, Faiz Ahmed Faiz. And I'll be using the translation by Mustansir Dalvi. Let me just quote a few lines from this poem. Subhe Azadi. Ye daag daag ujala, ye shab gazida sahar, wo intizar tha jiska, ye wo sahar to nahi. Translated as, this stained, pitted first light, this daybreak battered by night, this dawn that we all ached for, this is not the one. So this was written by Faiz when he was traveling to Kashmir, just after the 1947 partition. So he started writing this poem from Lahore, and when he just entered Srinagar, the poem ends at that point of time. So it is his perception, it is his experience of the partition. So the first point that comes to our mind, is this what we sought? We fought for. So with this, I come to the next one. So we know, along with freedom, August 1947 saw the establishment of the two nation states, India and Pakistan. Therefore, this year becomes Janus Fest. So it's the year of both triumph and tragedy. As we all know, the partition of India brought about the gigantic fratricide by the different communities based on the communal sentiments. So by the Hindus, by the Muslims, by the Sikh communities. So when we talk about partition, actually, it's about a chain of events. So what we have over there is Sir Radcliffe. So Sir Radcliffe, as we all know, he was given the task of drawing the dividing line between India and Pakistan. So before the appointment, strangely enough, Radcliffe had never visited India and knew no one in India. He was also unaware of the tension, the different sorts of problems in there, the problematic zones. So he was not aware of any of these dimensions and facts. In spite of everything, Sir Radcliffe is given this task of partitioning India. So we have this date, 13th August 1947, and he prepares the report, the partition map. Then on 14th and 15th August 1947, what happens? Pakistan and India are declared independent nations. This we all know. 17th August 1947, we come to a specific date. The Radcliffe Line is released. Now, what is this Radcliffe Line? It is the line that separates India and Pakistan, the dividing line, the border line. After that, India is partitioned. Therefore, the fate of the billions of people, this is sealed. I'd bring a few lines from W. Auden's poem over here. The poem is titled Partition. The name of the poem is Partition. So it's very funny, and it's also too farcical. Shut up in a lonely mansion with police night and day, patrolling the gardens to keep assassins away, he got down to work, to the task of settling the fate of millions. The maps of his disposal were out of date, and the census returns almost subtly incorrect. So let us again go back to that poem. So Radcliffe, he alienates himself, he shuts himself up in a lonely mansion. And to work, this is very funny, he gets down to work with the task of settling the fate of millions. This is so casual. The maps at his disposal were incorrect. He had not any updated maps with him. And he had no time to even check the facts, no time to inspect the contested areas. And then Auden adds, and this is the irony, this is the satire over there, he adds that the weather in India, as we all know, was frightfully hot. And he was having a bout of dysentery. That is why he went on visiting the loo. So the weather was frightfully hot, and a bout of dysentery kept him constantly on the trot. And in 7 weeks, it was done. The frontiers decided a continent for better or worse. So the Radcliffe Line, it robbed people of their homelands, of their identities, of their histories, of their relationships. So two nations were rendered apart by bitterness, and yet, in a strange manner, though now they're physically separated from each other, in a way they become conjoined twins. They're conjoined with memory, with history, with tradition. Therefore, the cartographer's whimsical division, so to say, shaped millions of lives and identities, leaving traumatic legacies in its wake. So India's partition brought about new sorts of identities, relations, histories. Therefore, everything now bound with memory. The past was never dead for these two nation states. The past can never be dead for them. Therefore, history, in a way, becomes an act of remembrance. This is very interesting because when you talk about history, you talk about concrete things, you talk about statistical things, you talk about records, you talk about facts. And when you talk about memory, when you talk about remembrance, you are talking about abstract ideas. Strangely enough, here the concrete and the abstract meet. I would quote a few lines from a poet of our times, from our generation, and this is a wonderful poem, Dividing Line. You tore into a land a crooked line, that morning we learned. The dawn had been bitten by moths, flying in droves in madness towards light, unsure of the nature of light that consumed everything. From above, we saw only a silver abyss, 1 mile long, either side plunged in darkness. The darkness of night, the darkness of ash. We searched, sifting the soil, but found nothing. We left trying to preserve at least memory. Memory has a very vital role to play. Our language, like us, had no land. So when we talk about partition, and the year again, I go back, 1947, which I was referring to again and again. So it is about the hydra-headed dimension, nature of things, hydra-headed dimensions. So on one hand, we have the displacement, 10, 20 million people that were displaced along this religious divide. Overwhelming number of refugees. The refugee crisis, it all started. So the newly constituted dominions, they were not ready in a way to rehabilitate these refugees. There were large-scale violence. There was large-scale violence, there were hostilities, there was hatred. As Ismat Chugtai says, these are the lines that haunts us. Those with bodies were whole, had hearts that were splintered. Families were torn apart. One brother was allotted to Hindustan, the other to Pakistan. The mother was in Hindustan, her offspring were in Pakistan. The husband was in Hindustan, his wife was in Pakistan. The bonds of relationship were in tatters. And in the end, many souls remained behind in Hindustan while their bodies started off for Pakistan. So this is how it all shaped up. Therefore, when we look back at partition, it's important for us because it has no beginning in a way and it has no end. As Butalia says, ramifications have not yet ended. Therefore, in order to understand the effects of partition, or the partition effects, as they call it, we need to know more about the partition itself, the dynamics of partition, not only about why it happened, about the political issues, about the historiography of partition, but also we need to interrogate and move the very boundaries of how we should read partition, write partition. And because this talk is for the PhD coursework students who would be into research very soon, how would research these histories? Such was the magnitude of this disaster, of this violence, of this horror, that historical details and statistical details, these fail to impart even a fraction of that pain and trauma. So we are told of the largest cross-border mass migration that has been recorded in history. We are talking about 12 to 15 million people who were affected. We are talking about 750,000 women who were raped and abducted. But the question is, this is only an official record. We know what happens in there is never recorded truly, properly. You know the politics at work, and therefore these records only show the tip of the iceberg. Therefore, as I was telling you, the nations, both these nations, the newly created India, Pakistan, they were not ready to rehabilitate the refugees. Therefore, communal tension happened and re-happened. And the migration continued, migrating as late as 1960s. And still we know the other issues continue. For example, we have the Kashmir conflict, we have the serious violence, the implications everywhere. So these things never end. Now, when you talk about the partition of India, so on one hand, we are talking about Punjab and Lahore. On the other hand, we have to talk about partition of Bengal also. The second partition of Bengal, and this I'm quoting from Pastor Fraser, and this is a very seminal book for the researchers, Bengal Partition Stories, an Unclosed Chapter, because partition is never a closed chapter, can never be. So as Fraser says, the second partition of Bengal left behind a legacy of violence that has continued ever since. So there is a reality of the continuous flow of economic migrants, refugees, infiltrators, illegal immigrants who cross over the border and pan out across the subcontinent. So this is the COVID-19 scenario, as Professor Niva Singh was just telling us. So we have lots of problems. We are facing lots of problems. And just a few days back, in our television sets, in the news channels, all over, we saw how the migrant laborers, they were facing problems as they wanted to return to their homes, to their places. So the same thing that makes them go for work, for a new home, settling in metropolitan centers as far off as Delhi, Mumbai, and that still keeps the question of partition alive even today. So in a way, when we're talking of partition, of course, the first thing that comes to our mind is an untold trauma. And therefore, we may categorize the trauma related with partition as the originary trauma. So usually the mind acts in this way that whenever there is a traumatic situation or whenever we are in a thing that causes trauma, the usual human response to atrocities is to somehow deport this from the conscious layer of the mind. But certain kind of trauma brings in memories that are too violent. And if that happens, trauma becomes unspeakable. So it becomes unspeakable. So whenever there is a memory, it brings in that kind of unspeakable horror, unspeakable trauma inside our mind. So you can see the reference over here, Trauma Recognition and the Place of Language, Juliet Michel. This is the book that this is the article that I referred to. It was published in the Diacritics by the Johns Hopkins University, and I've given you the reference also. I come to another aspect of trauma. So when Carrie Caruth, the trauma theorist, as you all know, talks about trauma, in a way, linking trauma with language also. Therefore, the need to revisit events and proclaim them loud. What is needed is that we write back. We write out that trauma. We write trauma. So it's not only about writing trauma. It's not only about writing trauma, but it's also about revisiting the moments. So in a way, we are talking about traumatizing violent histories, which provides us insight into how literature perceives, deals with, or memorizes inner or collective trauma. Because what happened in there became such a large-scale scenario that it formed a kind of collective trauma. Therefore, writing, speaking, documenting, journaling, any form, not only the kind of narrative, the written narratives over there, but any form. So you have journaling, you have documenting, for example, in ways of interviewing people and other things. So a way of reliving the memory. Past becomes a sort of processing of the mind to heal the different layers of this deep-rooted trauma. Therefore, in a way, this reliving, this revisiting, this going back down memory lane becomes a sort of re-memory. Now, when we talk about memory, as I was telling you, memory brings a sort of healing. So when we talk about healing, we talk about cleansing, we talk about purgation, we talk about purification, hence cathartic. As we all know, engine and chassis of all narrations, in a way, is memory. And quoting some author, we may say that memory begins where history ends. Therefore, history will be able to give us some recorded details. It will bring in a kind of analysis of some events. But what about the human side of the problem? What about the pain, the suffering, the meta-narratives of suffering? What about that? Therefore, memory comes in aid when history ends its narration. I come to the next section, narratives inspired by memory. So narratives inspired by memory, these have two sorts of functions. This concept I'm taking from Shubharanjan Dasgupta, Yashodhara Bagchi, et al. And others, okay? So narrative inspired by memory. So two functionalities over there. It has two functions. First, it strengthens and supplements the mainstream narrative. So the mainstream narrative is there, the historical document is there, everything is there. Yet, in a way, this kind of memory functioning will cause a kind of supplement, will add a kind of dimension to that. And also, as I told you, in a way, therefore, it makes history palpably human. Second, it offers the other space. On one hand, we have the grand narrative that homogenizes. But on the other hand, we know so many untold stories are there. And therefore, we are talking about public figures, we are talking about political figures, we are talking about common people. So when they speak out from the narration of their experiences, another story is constructed. As I told you, these sorts of meta-narratives, the little stories, may question even the grand narrative. Now, as I was talking about narratives, I would here discuss another important concept. I'd be referring to Homi Bhabha and his very seminal book, which is very important for the researchers to go through, Nation and Narration. So, as Bhabha says, there is a tension between the desire of a coherent narrative of nation and the presence of those who disrupt this desire for coherence. So let me explain this to you. So on one hand, we have the nation's telling of its own history through the people, through the memories. On the other hand, we have the recorded history, the documents, the published things over there, the grand narratives over there, which tell us how the history of the nation should be perceived. So on one hand, we have the people's memory. On the other hand, we have the history of the nation as the grand narrative gives us. And therein lies a kind of dichotomy. From partition narratives, you can see this, and I will just show you this book. This is the Partition Omnibus. This is very helpful for the researchers. You will get so many articles, very important ones over there. So for the beginners, this is very good one. This is by Oxford. Okay, so the title is the Partition Omnibus, and it has an introduction by Masirul Hasan. So in this slide, you can see that I have given an excerpt from that. The last 2 or 3 lines are very important. So when Masirul Hasan, he gives this partition narratives and he quotes from Gerald James Larson. So the last 3 lines where it tells that in many ways, it is the core plot in the unfolding narrative of modern independent India. Therefore, partition narratives are very important. They become the main plot. In a way, they become the main plot. Now, as I was telling you, the homogeneous grand narrative, it intersects with the meta-narratives, forming a vast collage of heterogeneous experiences. So on one hand, we have the horrors, the bloodshed in the name of independence. And therefore, the experience in there, whether we are to celebrate that or whether we are to mourn that. So it has been a very complicated experience for the sufferers. And it's not possible for history to capture the complexity of such an experience. And therefore, always we have gaps, lacunes, fissures. So what we do not see is there also. That brings to my mind the concept of absence presence. So what is absent is also present in that presence and vice versa. So in a way, these tell the untold trauma. And therefore, these narratives, the meta-narratives, the unwritten documents, the interviews, or what we have in the archives over there, these narratives make the subject of partition inexhaustible as well as open-ended. So narratives not only written, but also the unwritten one. When we discuss Anderson in relation to the concept of nation, where he says that nation is imagined communities, I refer to his very seminal book, Imagined Communities, Reflections on the Origin and Spread of Nationalism by Benedict Anderson. So he says that nation is imagined because of the members of even the smallest nation will never know most of their fellow members or meet them or even hear them, right? Therefore, in a way, this becomes imaginary. But when you talk about a nation with too many people, and therefore, there can never be any kind of homogenization. What we have over there is a polyphony. So you go back and think of the theory that you have gone through. So Bakhtin, okay, Mikhail, I'm referring to Mikhail Bakhtin. So when you are thinking of this theory of polyphony, the dialogic text and polyphony, so you have multi-tonguedness of the text. Similarly, you have the multi-tonguedness of the narratives. And therefore, it's a polyphony of voices, overlapping, crisscrossing, contradictory, ambiguous, opposing, affirming. So you have all the qualities over there. So there are too many intersections. Therefore, what comes out of that is very important. Homi Bhabha, in Nation and Narration, the book that I spoke of just a few minutes back, in that he has a specific article titled Dissemination, Time, Narrative, and the Margins of the Modern Nation. I would like to quote a few lines from this article. So he says that though he has been inspired by the works of Jacques Derrida, because ultimately when you are talking about dissemination, of course, Derrida, that comes to your mind. But he goes on adding, but something more to say, something more to my own experience of migration. I have lived that moment of the scattering of the people that in other times and other places, in the nations of others, becomes a time of gathering, gatherings of exiles and emigres, and refugees, gatherings on the edge of foreign cultures, gathering at the frontiers, gathering in the ghettos or cafes of city centers. And he goes on telling, he's talking about migration, he's talking about diaspora, he's talking about exiles, he's talking about imaginary homelands, so to say. He's talking about the rootlessness, the kind of alienation, the sense of loss, the sense of unbelonging that we feel deep rooted within us once when we're uprooted from our sources. So, when you are talking about displacement, one thing comes to a mind. What about women? Because when you are talking about partition, partition also has a gender dimension. As we all know, in every nation building project, the citizens are to perform a role based on their kind of, based upon their gender, the gender constructs, I would say. So these roles are given to them according to the traditional gender rules, right? I refer to another seminal book, which may be very helpful for the young researchers. This is the book From Gender to Nation, and this is by Rita Ivikovic and Julie Mostov. So this book is a very good one. You can go through the book. There, the authors say that the practices of nation building employ social construction of masculinity and femininity that support a division of labor. So what happens? A woman, she is a property of man, property of nation. Nation also equated to the feminine self. Nation is mother, needs to be protected. And women also, physically, symbolically, they would be there in different functions, but the men would always be there to defend, avenge the nation, etc. I would like to quote a little from a small excerpt from the Partition of India. So this book, there were numerous eyewitness accounts of the maiming and mutilation of victims. The catalogue of horrors includes the disemboweling of pregnant women, the women who were raped, who conceived, and their bodies were ripped open. They were unseamed, like what they say of Macbeth, how Macbeth unseamed the traitor. As students of literature, we all know. So just like that, they're unseamed. Their bellies are ripped open. And even if the children are born, if the babies are born, the babies' heads are shattered, crushed against brick walls. The victim's limbs, genitalia are cut off. Try to think of the situation. Cutting off the genitalia of the victim, not the perpetrator, not the person who has done that, but somebody who has suffered that. Why? Because it was meant to cleanse an existing generation and prevent in future reproduction. Because a woman's womb needs to be protected. And therefore, only few people have the right to her womb. A woman becomes the property, and therefore the womb needs to be cleansed. The nation-making process, this procedure, is inextricably linked with gender politics. And we understand that here also, patriarchy's hegemony prevails. Now, when you talk about women in the partition narrative, women in the discourse of the nation, so we talk about them as signifiers. So we talk about the feminine related with the national, the nationalistic rhetoric, Bharat Mata, or the nation as mother in India's struggle for freedom. Mothers, wives, and daughters designate the space of the nation and require the defense and protection of the patriotic sons. As Urvashi Butalia argues in Gender and Nation, Some Reflections from India, a nation also, like the body, becomes a gendered construct. Therefore, when you have a war or conquest, we need to ravage the other, the woman's body. So just as we take over territories, governments, similarly, we take over that territory also, the territory of woman's body. Therefore, when we talk about partition, the gender dimension of partition, the gendered violence comes to our mind. Ritu Menon, in her article, Do Women Have a Country? In that article, she was talking about the rehabilitation of women. And she said that it was a very crucial aspect of the state's perception of itself as benign and paternalistic. So you have to protect the women. You have to bring them back. You have to rehabilitate them. So far, so good. But I will explain the crux of the problem just after this. So the nation, to be that kind of socialist, secularist, secular democratic view that it has, the welfareist view that it has to bring in that connotation. Now, the gendered nature of violence of partition is seen in the fact that approximately, as she says, 75,000 women were reported to have been abducted and raped. But as I told you, this is just the official record. Therefore, revisiting gendered violence in partition, it generates the hope for a democratic alternative to the grand narrative. So we have the hidden histories of the women, and these now are open to the multiplicity of recognition. So it will show the liminal space women occupy. I would discuss about a specific day over here, December 6th, 1947. What happened? Now, as we all know, Mridula Sarabhai, she was appointed chief social worker, and she was to sort out the whole problem, and she was given this task of rehabilitation of the abducted women. And then a definition was also given about who would be rather taken as abducted. Therefore, any woman seen to be living with or in company of or in a relationship with a man of the other religion after March 1st, 1947, would be presumed to have been abducted, taken by force. So any woman who is staying in the same place or in the same house with another man, sharing the same space with another man of another religion, should be presumed to have been abducted or taken by force. So that was the definition that was given there. But I would show you another dimension to this. For this, I'd bring in a different discussion over here. Let us listen to what Mahatma Gandhi had to say on 7th December 1947. So this is not there in that slide. This is not in my PowerPoint presentation. I'm just telling you. So I would quote from Gandhi. So there was a prayer meeting on 7th December 1947. And Mahatma Gandhi now addresses the problem of Hindu and Sikh families. And he says, it is being said that the families of the abducted women no longer want to receive them back. It would be barbarian husband or barbarian parent who'd say that he would not take back his wife or daughter. I do not think the women concerned had done anything wrong. They had been subjected to violence. To put a blot on them and to say that they are no longer fit to be accepted in society is unjust. Okay, so far so good. What Gandhi has said, we accept that. But I will show you another statement of Gandhi. Just give me 1 second. So here, another date, 18th September 1947. 18th September 1947. This is not there in that slide. I'm just telling you. I have heard that many women who did not want to lose their honor chose to die. Many men killed their own wives. I think that is really great because I know that such things make India brave. What is it telling? That many men chose to kill their wives, and this is great because India is a country that talks of honor. So in a way, that would be honor killing. After all, life and death, a transitory game. The women have gone with courage. They have not sold away their honor. This is a line that I would question. The women were the victims of partition in a way. When they were raped, when they were tortured, they were not selling away their bodies. Not that their life was not dear to them, but they felt it was better to die than to be forcibly converted to Islam by the Muslims and allow them to assault their bodies. How can suicide be just a choice? And that too en masse suicide. How can murders be supported? There were not just a handful, but quite a few. When I hear all these things, this is the voice of Gandhi speaking, the father of nation. I dance with joy that there are such brave women in India. Okay, India is the land of the Savitri. India is the land of the Sita. We understand that. But let us take women just as women of flesh and blood. Let's also understand that it's about human beings. So therefore, death, national honor, patriarchal values, etc. Here, join with, here come up against, hand in hand with nationalism. In a way, it celebrates murder and suicide. So, when we're talking about inter-dominion treaty, that is why I explained the whole thing to you, wherein lies the problem. So when you say that you are celebrating women who have committed suicide or who have been murdered in the name of honor killing, then everything becomes so farcical. I would like to give you a few lines from Nobonita Kanungo, a writer from the Northeast. I was born in my father's difficult birth. I was born underneath the feet of a woman who saw her son being hacked alive before she was hanged naked to a polash tree and then burned. This is not only memory. This is writing partition. This is writing horror. So memory becomes a sort of concrete thing in there, though it's abstract. As Shubharanjan Dasgupta and Shubhasri Ghosh Yashodhara Bagchi, they in their book, The Trauma and the Triumph, the book I already referred to, Gender and Partition in Eastern India, Volume 2, and this book is also it's written in a very lucid language. It's very helpful for the researchers. So they opine that partition has changed the position of women vis-a-vis society and family. The lives of so many girls were torn asunder by partition. They could never lead a normal life since they had to sacrifice all their aspirations for the maintenance of their families. So from here, we come to the other side of silence, to quote Urvashi Butalia. Therefore, we are talking about material memory. History of partition through non-fiction, through memory, through things that have not been written down, published. I also refer to a very well-written book, very incisive book, and this is very recent one, 2017 publication. It's Remnants of Separation. If the researchers are interested, they can go through this book. It's a very good one. It's by Anshul Malhotra. So it talks about those voices, those unheard voices, just through kind of memory telling, material memory over here. So just like this, we have the narratives of refugees. So when you talk about memory and we talk about narration, you were talking about the self, the historical self and the ahistorical self. So on one hand, nation is the imagined community. But when you talk about Ghor, Gaon, when you talk about Desh, the very Bengali element, that sentiment, when people from Upar Bangla, they say Deshe Jawa, by Ipar Bangla say Deshe Jabu. Desh becomes something very different. Ghar, Gaon becomes something different. I've heard people in Mumbai telling that Gaon Jabu. Gaon there means homeland, because they have come to Mumbai, to Delhi for work. So this place is not an imagined one for them. This place is visited and revisited regularly in memories. So we know about the population exchanges that happened and that continue to happen. Here, this is just one picture, but if you search Google, this is taken from Google, you will get to see lots and lots of pictures like this. So people being sent, people becoming refugees, people becoming rootless. Now, since we're talking about the other forms of narrative, we are talking about the meta-narratives, we are talking about the material memories. For the researchers, I would bring 2 or 3 different perspectives to partition. If you're interested, you may also join the 1947 Partition Archive. So this is a non-profit oral history organization, Berkeley, California. So it has a registered trust in Delhi also. And it talks about partition. It collects, preserves, shares first-hand account of Partition of India. We also have Bengal Partition Repository Project, a very good one that's now being done. Educational Research Center we have in Kolkata, Salt Lake Sector 1. You can also join that. And in Facebook, you will get to know the pages, the things happening. So you have a Facebook page for that also. We also have the Partition Museum, Town Hall, Amritsar. That is a history museum. In addition, just like that, we have the Kolkata Partition Museum Trust also. And you also have the social websites. You will also have the online access to different materials, etc. You can also search the archive section of National Library, Kolkata. You will get lots of materials in there. Now here, I have just tried to give you a view of all the books that we have related to the narratives. That means fiction. First, I talked about non-fiction. Here we have the fiction section. So we have Clear Light of Day, Difficult Daughters, What the Body Remembers, and the list is a big one. So both from India, also from Pakistan. So not only we have Midnight's Children, Shadow Lines, but not only Pinjar, but there are plenty of other books as well. So from Pakistan also you have very creative writings on partition. Cracking India, Salt and Saffron by Kamila Shamshi, The Heart Divided by Suraya Khan. From Bangladesh, it's a wonderfully written, well-written fiction. A Golden Age by Tamina Anam, The Good Muslim by the same author. We have also Taslima Nasreen Lodja. Along with that, I have given you also the names, the titles of other books. You can go through that. I'm not reading out the titles. This is just for the research scholars. I've given you a kind of collage of the books. Map making, this book is a very good one. So you have another over here. This one, I would request you to go through because this would be a very fresh area for you. An epic of unwritten. This book, The Psychological Impact of the Partition of India, it talks about the psychological dimension of partition. It is edited by Sanjeev Jain, Alok Sareen. Also, this book, Savage Harvest, Stories of Partition, is a beautiful collection. If you're interested in poetry, if you're interested to look on this perspective, on this area. So you have Faiz Ahmed Faiz, you have Jivanananda Das, Amrita Pritam, Shiv Kumar. You also have Shankar Ray, you have Abida Talukdar, Sreshta Sen, Mumina Mela, Zia Ather, Fatima Ashkar. You can Google search, you will get many more names. So along with that, you can also work on films. For example, the films that were made on the Partition of Bengal. We have lots and lots of films in this section. Chinnamul, Megheta Katara, Kumul Gandhar, Subarno Rekha, Raj Kahini. This is the recent one directed by Srijit Mukherjee. You can Google search. I've taken it from Google only, and you will see there are lots and lots of films related with the Partition of India. That section I talked about was based on Partition of Bengal, and all these films are on Partition of India. So you can just Google search it, and researching on films, taking up the other sorts of narratives is also a very interesting area. In the poetry section, we have a very new collection and a very good one. It's titled Silence Between the Notes, Silence Between the Notes. So we have Sarita Zenamani, an Indian poet writing in English and Oriya, and also along with her, we have Aftab Hussain, an eminent Urdu poet from Pakistan. So this is a multilingual anthology. It's bringing in so many voices. It talks about human loss. It talks about pain, the catastrophe of partition. I would like to quote a few lines from Doodh Ka Katal, because in India, we celebrated just a day back the Mother's Day. A nation is the mother, and we have our mothers also. So when together we murdered our mother, my childhood was killed with the murder of my mother, and its cold corpse was left behind in your place. Even now, I become quiet when I remember that. I lose myself in the thoughts of that half a body that was your share. Of course, it's talking about the motherland, but still we are brothers from the same mother. Amrita Pritam, she gives a very beautiful poem on this partition. So many poems are there, but I would like to specify this one. You would find this very interesting. So she is actually requesting, seeking the blessing of Warissa. So Warissa, I call out to you today to rise from your grave, rise and open a new page of the immortal book of love. A daughter of Punjab had wept, and you wrote many a dirge. 1,000,000 daughters weep today and look at you for solace. Rise, O beloved of the aggrieved, just look at your Punjab. Today corpses haunt the woods, Chenab overflows with blood. It's a beautiful poem. So not only poems, short stories, or other works of fiction, but also with that, you may work on the plays that have partition as their subjects and also read in between the lines. For example, Drawing the Line. So this is 2013 play by Howard Brenton. So this was on Radcliffe, how Partition of India took place, what happened. Radcliffe's rule in the Partition of India in 1947. So this play was premiered from 3rd September 2013 to 11th January 2014 at London's Hampstead Theatre. This, I've just tried to give you an idea about the short stories that we have. So you can work on the short stories also. Not only Sadat Hasan Manto, but there are others. So you can check the short stories, you can work on that. You can work on other fields as well. So I know you must be very tired because you had to wait so long also because the technical glitch, I couldn't join in earlier. Anyway, so let me just conclude my lecture. The problem continues, the fight continues. We still have the Kashmir conflict. Demographics are nothing, as I was telling you. I've given you a kind of demographics. I've given you some kinds of numbers over there. So according to 2000 census, it's about 10 million residents, Kashmir. We are talking about 7.5 million in India-controlled territory. We are talking about 2.5 million in Pakistani-controlled territory, etc. But one thing we have to remember, we are brothers of the same mother. The need of the hour is empathy. The need of the hour is conscious awakening. The need of the hour is to have that kind of understanding of the problems. Then only perhaps we can bring in a kind of resolution. So the Kashmir issues, you are talking about Pakistan's positions, you're talking about India's positions, Kashmir's positions also. You're talking about maintaining a divided Kashmir, or you're talking about Kashmiri independence. But Kashmir bleeds, we have to understand. And the bleeding would continue if we do not bring in a solution. And the solution would be possible only when we understand the nuances. We understand those gaps, those silences. Kashmir only bleeds, Zia Ather. In the district near what they insist is a border, the dust is still uneasy. On the graves, now only numbered, dead men's shirts hang from the nearby trees, untied flags touched by kids too young to know poetry. The gash across the verdant body, now even deeper, the glass map of our country broken still. I swear, Shahid, I picked up where you left. She is referring to Aga Shahid Ali, that very famous poet. So she is the next generation. That is why she's referring to Shahid. I swear, Shahid, I picked up where you left. In this long war of learning, our Kashmir only bleeds. So I spoke about the different dimensions of partition, and I have tried to bring in the works that have been done in this field, the research works, very recent years. For example, I've taken in 2020 the books, because in your literature review, until and unless when you are doing that, and until and unless you know what work has been done, it won't be possible for you to add new dimensions. And that is why it's important to know about the things that are being done till date. And that is why I brought in the works from 2020. For example, this book, Jinnah, His Successes, Failures, Role in History. We have Memories and Post-Memories of the Partition of India by Anjali Giraroy, 2019 publication. We have Gender and Caste Borders, Boundaries. This is also 2019 publication. We have another very important work, an article by Gunita Singh. We are also talking about the social media culture and how or whether it can heal the wounds of partition, in which ways. This is also an article. So I have given you the works also from 2018. You can see Urvashi Butalia, Women and Partition, a reader. That book is very interesting, and it's a very good read also, an enjoyable read. So there's this one, Can't I Part with Partition Memories? So you can see from 2018, from 2017, I brought in the references. So with these words, I conclude my lecture. And again, I say heartfelt thanks to you all for your patient hearing. Not only that, because you stayed with me, waited for me, and in spite of this technical glitch, when I couldn't join in, you showed your patience. And thank you all so much.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, Dr. Neeraj, you can carry on.
Am I audible, madam?
Yes, very clear.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Anupama, for a brilliant speech. You talk about different dimensions of partition and certain terms, very important terms like gendered partition, politics of gender. Then you talked about Indo-Dominion Treaty, then role of memory, and other such things like 1947 Partition Archive, Partition Museum. You talked about so many things. Now you also referred to various books which dealt with the theme of partition. And we know that a number of people were affected by this partition, but the worst sufferers were the women. If you just see from the feminist perspective, you find that a number of women, they were tortured during this partition period, and there were cases of number of atrocities, violence, and gender discrimination also, owing to the male dominance of the society. Now they were unable to raise their voices. If you talk about women, they were unable to raise their voices because of the happenings that occurred in their lives, which have made them weak, scared, and submissive. Now, I'm very thankful on the behalf of the department, because you gave so many topics to the students of PhD coursework that they can work on different aspects of partition. If they are interested in novels, they can work on novels. If they are interested in the area of films related to partition, they can work on those areas also. Now, you referred to certain poems, certain short stories, and coming to the latest one, you talked about Kashmir issue. And in this way, I think this lecture has been very fruitful. And now may I request the students, if they have any query related to partition, the theme of partition, they may pose their questions one by one. Hello?
Yes.
Participant are requested to raise their hand. Their question will be taken into.
If they are interested, they may put their questions.
You can also put your questions in the chat box. But now it is time for your discussion now. We have some time left over for discussion, so the students can come up directly also with their questions one by one.
Okay, Samia Naz, you can ask the question.
Yes, Sumaya? Sumaya Naz, do you have any question? There is one question in the chat box, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Do you think partition was the result of religious differences? If not, then what were the main causes?
Okay. So, to the person who has placed this question, many thanks to you.
Yeah, this
Now,
is from Vikas Gautam.
okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much. My answer would be yes, because we all know about the Radcliffe line, which I was discussing, and we are talking also about Jinnah and his presidential speech in Lahore, where he's talking about the partition based on the kinds of religious divide, religious borders. We are talking about minorities, we are talking about the majorities, we are talking about the Hindus, Muslims who would be placed where, etc. Also, I refer to Benedict Anderson, where he says that religion is a spent force. So in that book, Imagined Communities, you have religion as spent force when you are talking about the concept of nation along with the dynamics of partition. Also, when you talk about the nation theories of partition, they're talking about two nation theories of partition. And there also, they talk about who were the initial settlers over here and how those sentiments were taken up in different contexts, etc. But religion was the major factor. But apart from that, there were other political factors as well. It was a game of power. It was about manipulations. It was about connivances. So these things, these are the in-between things that are unvoiced, things that remain in silence, things that remain hidden. So there are other problematics to this question. I hope I have answered your question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Both political and religious. As the powers at that time, they wanted to, what we still continue to say, that this is a slogan that is given to us, that we are like Britishers, people divide and rule.
Yes.
So that was the slogan that comes down from this.
And ma'am, the
partition.
first one, for example, the first partition of Bengal, the first one, not the second one, it was brought about because of this divide and rule policy only, no?
Yeah.
So that was the exact thing that happened in there.
So any other question?
Other question is also in the chat box.
There are some questions in the chat box. What went wrong with Kashmir, and what are the possible solutions of Kashmir problem?
Now, thank you for this question.
This is from Manjurul Haq.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Haq, for your question. The answers are too many, and the answers are not easy. Because this Kashmir problem that we're talking of, it's not only about the politics, the power politics, about the divide, about the Kashmiri's point of view, about the Indian point of view, about Pakistan's point of view in there, as I was telling in my lecture. It's also about the people, the relations. It's not only about historiographies. It's not only about what happened. It's not only about some specific date, some amount of people who were under some control of governance. It's not that. It's about people. It's about sentiments. It's about relations. The thing is, what is the solution? And we all know the answer. If I say that, yes, we have a solution and I have a solution, that would be naive on my part. That would be very foolish. And we say that fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Only this much I can say, that we need empathy. we need to have love, we need to have understanding. Then only, even if we have political dimensions to certain things, things will be sorted out differently. So once we know, then only we'll understand that no matter what happens, relations stay, relations, they remain. And that is why we become one in that, in our memories, in our shared moments, in our shared cultures also. So it's better to have that.
Yeah. Because power and politics, I think they lie in some limited hands. But the
Yes.
general people, they have to understand that it is their problem, and they have to fight the issues with their empathy and what you talked about, compassion and love for each other. So this is the mindset that they have to understand, that the solution that the politicians are offering, that is not the proper solution. The proper solution lies with the people themselves. So there is another question, ma'am. Do you think remembering and reminding trauma can lead us to bright and prosperous future of both the countries, India and Pakistan? This is from Prakhar Medhavi.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Prakhar Medhavi. Thank you so much for this thought-provoking question. The thing is that there are two aspects. Sometimes we feel that going back memory lane can be very painful. Also, it can bring a sort of hatred for things that have been hidden within the mind, hidden deep within the mind. But, the mind has different layers. And even if you are trying to get rid of certain things from the conscious layer, we know of psychoanalysis. As students of literature, you have all had your theory papers on that. So we have the subconscious layer of the mind, we have the unconscious layer of the mind. And even if you try to get it away from the conscious layer, it will still be there in the unconscious. Therefore, as I said, revisiting, rewriting, rereading, talking about those things, just as a psychiatric does. So what happens when you have some kinds of traumatic memories in your mind? A psychiatrist will always tell you to speak it out or to journal it so that you write it down. Because writing, speaking, reading becomes a sort of processing, just as we process our computers, just as we reboot our computers. Today, my computer, my laptop failed me. So, mind needs to be processed also. And therefore, memory, visiting those years down memory lane brings a sort of healing of the mind. I would refer to another thing. I was referring to this Facebook page on partition. Yes. So you will get different pages over there. And if you just join in, you will see that there are some sorts of interviews by people, the people who have migrated to other places. So now they are diaspora, right? So they're now well settled, etc. So even if they're having very good quality of life, they're well settled and go back. And they have come back to Bangladesh or to India just for the sake of revisiting, so that the relationships now somehow this come close. They're rebonded once again. Think of what happens in Amitabh Ghosh's The Shadow Lines. Thamma, along with Tridib and other members, they go back to Bangladesh. They go back to Dhaka. Why? What was the need? They go back to Dhaka only because they could not leave the memory just like that. Otherwise, it will fester up like a wound. It will go on bleeding. It will continuously bleed. Therefore, to heal up the wound, this memory collage is also needed. Thank you so much for your question.
What is the symbolic significance of mainstream narrative? How does it differ from other space?
Okay. So thank you for this question.
Ramen
yes,
Goswami.
Ramen Goswami, thank you so much. So suppose you are talking about the grand narrative. You are talking about something that is already there, and we are not looking into the other dimensions of certain things in certain ways. For example, when you are talking of partition, or when you are talking about this nationalism, the narrative of nationalism, the grand narrative of nationalism. What happens? Usually we talk of Gandhi, we talk of Mountbatten, we talk of Jawaharlal Nehru, we talk of some other members. And among the female members, we are talking about only 2 or 3 women out there. Is it not so? But what about those women? Those women who cooked for their husbands, for their sons, whose sons went to this war front, never came back. They've also participated in certain sorts of ways. For example, suppose you have read Your Difficult Daughter by Manju Kapoor, this book. You know, there are certain areas where Virmati is observing that other women are participating. For example, I will give you another text. This is by this Sulekha Sannal. It's a very good one, though not much research has been done on this. Sulekha Sannal's Nabankur, in Bengal it was Nabankur, and it has been translated as Seedling's Tale, Nabankur, Sulekha Sannal. So we have this character Chobi participates in this nationalism, the movement, right? But the way people see, it's about the men narrative. It's about men participating in some ways. And whenever women are talked of in narration in nation, they're talked of as Birangona, the martyrs. So the other dynamics are left out. I think that I would conclude this answer by telling you that please refer also to that book, The Other Side of Silence. This is by Urvashi Butalia. You will understand that how in between lines, this emerges the little narratives, the meta narratives, and how the meta narratives are equally important, like our grand narratives of nation. Thank you.
One more question occurs here. Why did women become particular targets of the violence during partition? This is again from Vikas Gautam.
Okay, Mr. Gautam, thank you so much. Now, to answer this question, first, let us go back to the basics. So when you talk about gender and sexuality, so sex is biological, right? No question about that in that way. But when you talk about gender, you're talking about gender constructs. Therefore, femininity, masculinities become constructs. And therefore, the woman's body, we have a patriarchal society, but the hegemony of patriarchy prevails. Androcentric society, male-centered society. And what happens here? Women are like the properties. Go back and think of what we had in Manu. So women are not to have their rights to properties, etc. They would belong to husbands, later to children, first to their fathers, then to their husbands, later to the children, etc. I'm not going deep into that. But the point is very important, that women are regarded as properties. And if something is a property, it becomes object, not a subject anymore. Therefore, what happens when, for example, when the invaders leave the country, it happened in India, they demolished the temples or the mosques or the masjids or whatever, gurudwaras, because they thought that this was the property of this group of people, and while going back, we need to just ravage, to pillage these things. Similarly, a woman's body, it is thought, belongs to a definite house. So if it is India, woman's body belongs in there. And therefore, if we are to leave India, if we are to invade India, we need to ravage those bodies. And that is why they became the victims of violence. It's not about how old they were. They were 8 years old girls, 6 years old girl, 80 years old ladies, old women, and their bodies were mutilated. They faced unspeakable horror. And this is the answer, that there's always a gender dimension to any kind of violence. Usually this happens the way we have things in India, which is a patriarchal society.
There's one question from Aman Sagar. Do you think that women have got their all rights and freedom in all areas after partition?
Thank you for this question. And this question will make us say so much. No, the answer is no, absolutely not. Only a few women, for example, some of us having some sorts of privileges. What about others? And even amongst us, suppose This would be what to say. And there's endless discussion on that. So it's not about getting rights at some places, in some sectors. It's not only that. When you are stifled from inside, when you feel the claustrophobia from inside, for example, what is the role of a mother? Have you thought of that in our society? A mother needs to care for her son, for children. Yes, fathers also care for their children. That's different. But usually it is thought that the first priority of mothers would be homes, families. For women, it would be marriage, to raise children, to bathe them up, to see them grow, etc. But for men, more important is work. For men, you may go out at 10 p.m. at night, 11 p.m. at night, 12 a.m. early morning. But suppose a woman goes out, in some places she's safe, but in other places it doesn't happen that way. There can be endless discussions, but my answer would be no. We have got our rights, the constitutional rights are there, but there's a large gap between the theory and the practice, between the practice and the precept.
Any more questions? I think there are some more questions. Our language, like us, had no land. Is there any ray of hope or solution for escape from darkness of night and from darkness of ashes? Ramen Goswami.
Okay. Raman Goswami, thank you so much for your question. Thank you for listening to what I was telling. Now, the thing is that pessimism is never a solution, is it not so? We live as humans because we do hope. No matter how dark the days may be, no matter how dark the situation may be, we still hope. We hope against hope. And therefore, even if we have lost, in a way, our homeland, some of us have lost even the language. For example, people who belonged in specific places, we say that you were also born in a language. I hope you have understood my point. Just as you were born in a family, you were also born in a culture, you were also born in a language. So first, the language chooses you, and then you choose the language. So with partition, with division, what happens? You are being taken away from all your roots. But still, from the ashes, we have to rise like the phoenix bird. You know, this mythological phoenix bird, mythological. So the phoenix bird, it just grows to that fire, it burns itself. And then what happens? Out of the ashes of the phoenix rises the new one. Similarly, through revisiting, reworking, rereading, analyzing, and becoming, as I was telling you again and again, more empathetic, more understanding, more better human beings to say. So yes, we do hope, and we are humans. We will hope against hope.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chaudhary. I think there are no more questions. Do you have any questions? Anybody has any question? Put it up very immediately so that ma'am can answer your questions. If no, then we can invite Dr. Vikas Mohan Sai for vote of thanks. No, I can't see any questions, any more questions. So Dr. Vikas Mohan Sahai is now invited for vote of thanks for today's lecture.
Madam Chairperson, Professor Nibha Singh, Head, my esteemed colleagues, dear students of Ph.D. coursework, our esteemed expert panelist of this web lecture, Dr. Anupama Chaudhary, Assistant Professor of English, MUC Women's College, Bardhaman. I would like to thank Dr. Chaudhary for her very thought-provoking, very invigorating lecture on trauma, memories, and imagined identities, revisiting India's partition. Ma'am, certainly of PhD coursework, uh, of course, they uh, uh, they they have gone through this this section, this unit, but you have also just thrown light to different dimensions of the partition. You have just thrown light to the dynamics of partition. Of course, not only from the point of view of India, but from Pakistan's point of view, from Bangladesh's points of view also. Uh, of course, very nicely, ma'am, you dealt the the demographics of Bengal, the partition of Bengal, and the Red Cliff Line. Your scholarly lecture, I think the students are going to be certainly benefited by this lecture. Of course, in physical class, if I recall, some of the students just they have raised question why the scar is still afresh. The scar which it was in 1947, 73 years back, but the scar is still fresh. And if I eyes don't need a visa. Dreams have no borders. Eyes closed, I cross the border every day to meet Mehdi Hassan. Of course, he refers that the scar is still there, and he recalls the ghazal of Mehdi Hassan, and the ghazal of Mehdi Hassan, अब की बिछड़े तो शायद कभी ख्वाबों में मिले, जिस तरह सूखे हुए फूल किताबों में मिले. By this ghazal by, of course, Mehdi Hassan. So Guljar Dinavi, of course, he in some of his short stories also, he recalls Dina, his paternal village, which is across the border. So just the students, they had also discussed this, and they just they were very particular on both the front, of course, not only Bengal, but on Punjab also, the demographic, the migration, the influx from this side to that side. So ma'am, you just you dealt very nicely, and the books of Urvashi Butalvi and just Misharul Hassan and Mikhail Bakhtin and so many other just writers you have suggested. I think our students are going to be benefited by this scholarship.
The voice is not coming, sir.
they, I think you must have felt that they enjoyed your lecture. They very actively participated in question answer session also. So I thank you. You spared time for the PhD coursework students of Magadha University. I'm highly thankful. You just your lecture for your lecture, and I think our students are going to be benefited by this lecture. Once again, I thank you, Madam Dr. Anupama Chaudhary. I thank you on behalf of the complete Department of English, Magadha University, Bodh Gaya. Finally, I would like to thank my colleague and just the technical expert of this web lecture series, Mr. Sanjay Kumar. Yeah, to ma'am, to know Mr. Sanjay Kumar. Mr. Sanjay Kumar is also an assistant professor in the Department of Postgraduate Department of English, Magadha University, Bodh Gaya. He is also nodal officer of Magadha University right now, and it is his technical excellence which just gave us a very wonderful afternoon, and your scholarly lecture. Certainly the students are going to be benefited. I thank you once again on behalf of my department. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir. It has been my pleasure.
Thank you. So,
Yeah.
Nibha ma'am?
Yes.
Yes.
So I thank you again, Dr. Chaudhary, for your illuminating lecture. And I must tell you that this Sanjay Kumar is not only an assistant professor and nodal officer, he's also a student of the research PhD coursework, research work. So he is participating that way, both the ways. And I thank all
and ma'am, I would just add one line to this, that though I belong to a different institute, in a way, I learn from you all. You all are my teachers, and I am your student as well. All of you there.
Yes,
Thank you.
we all learn from one another each and every day. There is no doubt about it. So thank you all for coming to this web lecture series 1. We have started with you, and we hope next week also we will be able to arrange some lecture for the PhD coursework students. I don't know which date, what time, but certainly we'll arrange some lecture on some other unit. So once again, I also thank all my colleagues, all the students, and especially Dr. Chaudhary for being here with us. So thank you, ma'am. And now it's time for closing this web series lecture. So Sanjay, we can now